Okay, welcome to your third lesson in Crime and Punishment. We're still looking on causes of crime. What I want you to do to start with is looking at these pictures which come from the 18th and 19th centuries. I want you to have a think about the types of crimes you might associate with this period in history. So you studied a lot of this in year 8, you studied a lot of this in year 9 when we looked at Jack the Ripper. What kinds of crimes would you associate with this type of period? So I want you to pause for a minute and make some notes. So you might have guessed that what we're looking at today is the pressures of industrialisation and urbanisation in the 18th and 19th centuries. We're going to categorise some of the factors that led to urbanisation and we're going to evaluate their impact on crime. So, agricultural revolution then. There is new methods and machinery on farms that led to a fall in demand for agricultural labourers. Now you might remember a little bit of this from year 9 when we looked at the Luddites and we looked at some of the protests that happened in rural parts of Wales. But there was a fall in demand for actual agricultural labours. There was a fall in demand for people because there was machinery that could do the jobs quicker and easier than they could, and for cheaper as well. So you've got Jethro Tull's seed drill that was developed in 1741, by there is an example of this. So many were forced to actually leave the countryside and migrate to a rapidly expanding towns like Merthyr Tydfil. So there was no work in the agricultural areas anymore, and so people were forced into the towns and into the cities. Britain, previous to the Industrial Revolution, had been an agricultural country. Its main source of income, its main economy had been agriculture, farming. However, when the Industrial Revolution started, which obviously started within Britain as well, a lot of people moved to these larger areas, to these towns and cities in order to get work. So, urbanisation, it dramatically changed the way people lived and worked. And it increased population in towns and cities such as Liverpool, Birmingham, Manchester. There's a rise in the level of crime because of this, and in some instances it actually resulted in the emergence of new types of crime. So urbanisation is basically a movement of people from rural areas to urban areas. So the people moving from the countryside into towns and cities. That is how we would classify what urbanisation is. So make sure you get this down in your books. So historians have identified a range of push and pull factors, factors that pushed people out of the countryside and factors that pulled people into the big towns and cities, that explain the dramatic increase in the size of towns and cities in the 19th century. So as we've just said, push factors driving people away and the attractions of those pull factors of working in the industrial towns. So on a sheet that you have got in front of you, or you should have that is attached to this PowerPoint, I want you to colour code the factors into push and pull, making sure that you read them properly as you go. So if you finish that as well, what do you think had the biggest impact on the movement of people in cities? And explain your answer. So have a look at this graph now and have a think about what it shows us about crime rates in this period. What could account for the trend witnessed between 1820 and 1850? So the number of thefts and violent crimes, you could see in this rises dramatically. And although it does start to tail off in the 1900s, it's still nowhere near as low as it was in 1750. So have a think about what types of things could actually have caused this trend. So maybe you've thought about things like urbanisation, a lot more people in a denser population, fighting for space to live, living conditions, lack of jobs, that kind of thing. Lack of jobs mean people turn to petty theft in order to live, basically. There's lots of different reasons that you can see from some of the reasons that you've looked at earlier as to why crime would increase during this time. So you can see here as well, the population increases hugely between 1750 and 1851. We have a massive population increase. In particular here, look at Merthyr. Merthyr goes from 400 to 46,378 over 100 years. That's a huge growth in population, and that is completely down to industrialisation and the growth of the ironworks. All these big cities become big cities because of industrialisation. London obviously experiences the biggest growth in its population. It's always had the highest population density anyway, and that increases from 675,000 in 1750 to 2.3 million in 1851. To give you some context there is about 3.1 million people that live in Wales. So over two-thirds of that amount of people live in London in 1851. It's absolutely huge. Okay, so on the PowerPoint that is attached to this, you should be able to click on this hyperlink, and I want you to watch it very closely. See if you can identify some reasons why crime was so rife in London in the 19th century. So I'm going to pause that for you now. So it's very easy for a criminal to evade capture through the narrow, winding streets, alleyways, and courts. You've got geographical factors that cause urban crime. It's easy to remain anonymous. Pre-industrial villages, people had known each other, but in these new towns, people did not. It's easier to get away with crime. Policing is not very effective at this point. There's not really a police force until 1829, and even then it's lacking in funds and it's lacking in technology, as you can imagine. And up to this point, again, which we will look at in a later key question, policing is not it's not too bad in London, but elsewhere it's not very good at all. Poverty and poor living conditions led to many people resorting to crime to improve their lives. Many people are dissatisfied with their lives, they want more money. Orphans were common in industrial towns due to how life expectancy was quite low, and often they turned to crime to survive. The mortality rate in places like London, in places like Merthyr Tydfil, was around your mid-20s, and so quite often children were left without parents. Most workers have got no political rights, they can't vote at this point, and they've got no legal way to change their living and working conditions. They protest about things like this, like the Merthyr Rising, the Newport Charter, all these lots of other protests as well, but it is very, very difficult to change. And there are, as you know from doing Chartism in Year 9, there are lots and lots and lots of obstacles in the way of anybody being able to vote. Only really the rich can vote, only really the rich can be MPs, and so there's lacking in ways to actually change their situations, and so they turn to crime. So, using pages 133 and 134 of the textbook, which should be photocopied and put up or typed up in a different format and popped onto this PowerPoint, could you please show the factors that increased crime during the 19th century? Try if you can come up with some symbols to match each factor. What do you think then had the biggest impact on crime levels? Explain that as well once you're done. So, if you can complete that, then that is the end of the lesson. Thank you very much.